Good afternoon, and welcome to another Brown Girls in the Great Book Club. I'm your host, Anika. That's Shreya, and today we are going to be discussing Rick Bennett's The Vanishing Half. So, Shreya, give us a quick synopsis, and then we'll jump into our discussion.
So the Vanishing Half is a story about a single family, and it covers the time period between the 1950s to the 1990s, and it's mostly set in the deep South, and there's a portion that's set in California, and it follows these two sisters, Desiree and Stella.
Yep.
And they both grow up in a southern African American community. But the thing is about this community that they grow up in, all of the African Americans are very, very light skinned, almost I would say the color of Tia and Tamara Mowry. I think that's the color of the people that's around them, and it's almost it's a very
probably lighter.
Probably lighter too, and
I'm thinking more of a probably Mariah Carey.
Yeah, that level of where they're, you can tell that they're not white, but they're also not super dark either, right? And it's almost a very colorist based society in the fact that they recognize that they're all colored, but they also turn their nose up against people who come into the town and are darker skinned. And it's in this community that Desiree and Stella are both born into. And Desiree has always had this feeling of wanting to escape this town called Mallard. And eventually, when they're 16 years of age, both Stella and Desiree both end up escaping and running away to New Orleans. And I think it was within a year, Stella just up and leaves Desiree on her own. And Desiree has no idea what happened to Stella at that point. But she still tries to make it out in the city on her own. And she ends up meeting a man who she ends up marrying, and it basically devolves into a very abusive relationship. But out of this relationship, Desiree has a child, and in order for her child to have a better life, she decides to run away from her husband and go back home to Mallard. And this is where essentially Desiree spends the next 20 years of her life raising her child, but also at the same time not knowing what happened to her sister Stella. And the back half of the book then follows Stella as we learn what happened to her. She basically gets into a relationship with her boss at work, who doesn't know that she is a colored woman. He thinks that she's white. So instead of coming out and telling him the truth, she decides to pass for white and let this man think that she's something that she isn't. And they basically move to California, where she sheds her previous identity and becomes almost like a white woman. No one questions her because of her skin color and because of the man that she's associated with. So she basically hides who she is, where she comes from. She makes up a whole story about how her family passed away and she has no one left. So this is the life that she creates for herself, this new identity where she is a white woman and doesn't have to live the life of a colored woman. And she has a child, and she doesn't tell the child anything about her past. And there's a separate storyline in the book where now Desiree's child, Jude, and Stella's child, Kennedy, their lives intersect later on when they're both adults. And it's very interesting to see how there are patterns and similar storylines that both Desiree and Kennedy and Stella and Desiree go through, but because of the decisions and certain decisions that they make, they're both labeled differently by the society that they live in. So, Anika, I'm opening it up to you. What did you think about the book?
First and foremost, something that you forgot to acknowledge is that we have some LGBTQ representation in here because Jude's boyfriend is transgender. So that was surprising. I found that surprising for the book because, especially, this book isn't set common day. Like when we find out about Reese and Jude, I think it was around like the 80s. So that was kind of like looked down upon, and like it went through Reese's journey of like being on street hormones and then getting proper hormones, and then him trying to hide his chest because he didn't get surgery yet, and then it goes through his surgery. So like that was like a minor part that I felt kind of like stuck out in a major way because of the society that we're living in and its Pride Month. But in regards to the actual main storyline, I think it's a story that a lot of I think it's a story that's common to a lot of Black people. It's like sometimes there's books where you read and you're like, that would never happen, that can never happen, or like, where did the author come up with this idea? But with this book, like, it very much seems relatable. Like you can see that happening, or knowing a story similar to it.
Like I told you earlier, I feel like I've seen this story before represented in both film and other literature. Like this story specifically reminded me of this book that I read a couple of years ago called Passing, and it was originally published in 1923. It's the author's name is Nella Larson, but it's essentially the same story where you have two childhood friends who grow up in the same like African American community. They're both very light skinned, but once they leave their community, there's certain choices and decisions that they make, especially the choice of who they choose to associate with, has a big influence on how they're perceived by the society around them. And in that book, there was a character who essentially decided to pass for white, married a white man, had a child with him, and this was the identity that she had created for herself, but it kind of backfired for her at the end. Hi, Sean. It kind of like backfired for her at the end because once her husband found out that he had been lied to, that the woman that he had married was in fact a colored woman, he ended up beating her severely. So I drew parallels from that book to this book, and I'm wondering if there was some type of inspiration that was taken from that book. But it also reminded me of this other story, of this other movie that I watched that I sent you a clip earlier, Anika. It's called The Imitation of Life. And in the
I can keep talking. I'm going to see if I can get the link and post it in the chat.
And in the scene that I sent Anika, we have a character who is essentially denying who her mother is. So her mother is very, very dark skinned, while the character in question that I'm talking about is very light skinned and has been passing for white. And in this scene that Anika is going to be posting here, she's basically telling her mother, who she hasn't seen in years at this point. Her mother had to find her and like go out and meet her. And basically this woman said, when you see me in the street, please, for the love of God, do not acknowledge me. I have a chance to make a better life for myself as long as people don't know that you are my mother. And it just made me think about all the other people in the world in real life who have had to make decisions like that in order to, you know, it's messed up, but they've had to make decisions like this in order to sort of get along in society, in order to like reach their full potential. And it's really messed up, the fact that people have to make decisions like this, like cutting off their family, forgetting who they are in order to pass.
Yeah, that's the thing, because like passing is basically a survival technique. Like being Black to this day is a dangerous thing. So using that privilege that you have of like passing privilege, it's a survival thing. Most times you don't do it to be like I'm better than you. Like people do it to protect themselves, and then they marry white men or whatever to try and like breed their blackness out for the protection of their future legacy.
But when does it get to be a point that it just becomes too much? Because when I was reading the book, I thought that Stella had become too much when her daughter was playing with another little girl who was colored, and then the two kids got into a fight, and then Stella's daughter Kennedy basically called the other girl an N-word, and apart from Stella hitting Kennedy as punishment, she didn't really do anything after that. It's almost like she was allowing that to happen, even though your daughter just used a word that like was used to deny and like oppress your ancestors, but now you've just created this whole identity where like she's never going to know that.
Well, I mean, it could be a bunch of different things. Like Stella may not have said anything more because then it would be questioned, like, why are you harping on this? Like, why? What does it matter? Why are you harping on this? Because the thing is, Kennedy didn't get that language from her mother. She picked it up from other people. Because her mother became friends with that little girl's mother. Like, that was her only friend. So, and then another thing is that technically, you know how they say you can say it if you're black? Technically, Kennedy's black. On a technicality, she can say it.
I wanted to talk about like the hierarchies of colorism within like the black community. So you have this community, Maylard, that was basically a town full of light-skinned black people, and you would think that
founded
because
by Desiree and Stella's like forefathers, like they are a direct descendant of the founder of Mallard.
So like you would think that in this community there would be a certain type of awareness of how racism and viewing people of different skin colors is like, if you treat them badly, it's like a bad thing, right? But even in this community when you have examples of like people who are like darker toned coming into the community and people just sort of being very rude, being very hateful towards these darker skin tones. And it just made me feel like, why did we do this to ourselves? Like why are we reinforcing this hateful status quo?
I mean, you know the answer to that.
Yeah, I do know the
colonization.
Answer to colonization, but after a point, it's just like we're giving hate to our own kids, especially there's another storyline in the book where we follow Desiree's own daughter as she grows up in Maylard, and one of the things that is it's a very important aspect of her storyline is the fact that she doesn't look like Desiree. She's very dark skinned. She takes after her father. I think there were so many references to her skin color in this book.
The book starts off like that. The book starts off when Desiree drags her back to Mallard, and everybody's like, "Who is like that? Looks like Desiree, but who's this black child?
Yeah.
That can't be her child."
And for Jude, growing up in this town that prefers lighter skin tones, you can see how it damages her self-confidence, her self-esteem, especially when like an example of a thing that happens to her is there's a boy that she goes to school with, and he bullies her in school, but he secretly likes her. And they actually get into like a little side relationship where like every night she goes out to meet him behind a barn and they kiss and they make out, but he never would want to be seen with her during the day because evidently she's not good enough for him.
Glad you're here still, friend.
Hi, Shalina.
We haven't really gotten into the discussion yet, so
you're right on time. And Anika, it just made me think of all the other stories that I've heard from girls in real life, how guys would be so interested in them when no one's looking, but the second that they're out in the daylight, it's like, who is this?
Yeah, it's true. Or I've even seen it the opposite, where I remember in high school there was some guy who was some black guy was dating this white girl, but it was like secret, and like they wouldn't you wouldn't see them together in the hallways, and like they would only like meet up like after school, and like they would make sure to leave the school at different times. Like why do you
And if anything, this boy in school like called her like some very, very bad names, like tar
yeah,
names.
she should
Like,
have some self-respect.
yeah, like, and all of that had an effect on her self-esteem too, right? The fact that when she left Maylard, she thought that the only type of relationship anyone would want to have with her is behind closed doors.
Yeah, to the point where when she eventually met Reese, she felt like she wasn't good enough for him.
Mm-hmm.
Or like she felt like he wouldn't want her, he wouldn't want to stay.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they each brought their own baggage to the table.
Yeah, I thought Reese's whole storyline was also very interesting too. When you compare that to the storyline of Stella, and the fact that they're both trying to create an identity for themselves, and Reese was like a born female, and then once he left his family home, he eventually became like a full male, and part of the storyline with him is the fact that Judith's trying to help him save up for his reassignment surgery, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was top surgery.
For his top surgery, and their whole dynamic together, I thought was really beautiful. The fact that they were able to find love together amidst all their crazy baggage.
Okay, hold on. Let me pull up some questions. Okay, let's first talk about what the title means in the context of this story. So, the vanishing half. The very obvious is that two twins, each of them are one half of each other. Oh, we never mentioned they're identical twins. That's important. They're identical twins. And obviously Stella vanishes, which Stella is a shitty
Sister,
friend / sister,
daughter.
Daughter, how do you? This is your best friend, your twin. You guys shared everything in the womb and outside the womb, and then you just all up and disappear. Not to mention that it was Desiree who was the one who's like, let's like leave home. Like when they're 16, it was Desiree's idea to just like run away from home, and she had to convince Stella to do that. So then she's basically like taking care of her sister, and then what does Stella do? She just abruptly leaves.
Well, in that instance, I feel a little bit more sympathy for her, because we do find out in the book that she was sexually molested by her mother's employer one day. And
which means that you think she would try to run away quicker. She shouldn't have to be like...
I think Desiree had to show her that was possible before she fully grabbed onto the idea.
Okay, but that doesn't explain her bad behavior of leaving her sister.
Oh yeah, nothing explains that. But I also feel that Stella is an opportunist in the fact that she saw an opportunity to leave her past behind, which was her husband, who was her employer at the time. And she saw that opportunity. It wasn't the fact that she was in love with her husband. It was the fact that she had an opportunity to shed her previous identity and become something new, something that she said was an identity that could give her freedom, which is aka being white. So she took her opportunity and then said bye. Didn't even say bye to Desiree. I think she just left her a note. But I also found that it was interesting in the fact that both both of them were twin sisters, but it also seemed like they didn't really know each other that well, even though they thought they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Stella never revealed to Desiree about that employer guy.
Mm-hmm. And Stella also never we're talking so much about Stella, but Stella never revealed how she was feeling about her employer. I can't remember his name, the guy that turned out to be her husband, Mr. Sanders. We'll just call him Mr. Sanders.
Is his first name like Billy or something?
Something like that. But yeah, she didn't tell her how serious it was with her employer slash husband, and that's why Desiree didn't even know at first that she ran off with him.
Exactly, because all she knew is that like she had this job, and that like she was. I don't even did Desiree know that Stella was pretending to be white at the job?
She did know him, but it was under the assumption that it was only going to be a temporary thing.
Mm-hmm. And then it became like a 20 years.
A 20 plus years thing.
Yeah, because basically in the book, we follow it along until Kennedy and Jude are, what, in their 30s?
Yes, in their 30s. Or,
That's
maybe late 20s. Mm. Can we talk about Jude and Kennedy's dynamic for a little bit?
Yes, so I was actually going to bring that up in relations to the cover, because the two cousins are kind of like two halves of each other as well, where they're like the yin and yang, like they're completely opposite and different.
Mm-hmm. And like there's a part in the book,
they're literally black versus white.
There's a part in the book where Jude envisions how her life could have been if her mother had passed for White. And I think she was drawing upon what Kennedy's life was like at the moment. She was basically saying, like, if my mother didn't marry who she married and go back to Maillard, like, would I be more like Jude would I be more like Kennedy in the fact that I'm spoiled and like I have like a safety net to fall back on, or just things like that. And then later in the book, once Kennedy finds out who her mother's real family is, she also sees what her life could have been if her mother had just stayed who she was. And she was also drawing comparisons between herself and Jude at that time too. And I just found it interesting that the title could be applied to both the sisters and the cousins.
Mm-hmm. And especially, it seems like Kennedy was a waste of privilege, because Kennedy had everything spoon-fed to her. She was able to go to any school she wanted, basically, because of money, not because of brains. And she squandered it. She like dropped out and whatever. And then Jude, on the other hand, came from literally nothing, and she excelled in her schoolwork. She's in medical school.
She's in med school, and people didn't think she had it in her to do that, just based off of how dark her skin was. Adika, I know I told you this before, but I feel like Kennedy is exactly like this real life person called Olivia Jade, who was the daughter of Lori Loughlin, who she basically went to jail for over like the college admission scandal.
She's Aunt Becky on Full House.
She's Aunt Becky on Full House, but basically she got caught in a scheme where she paid like she paid like people to basically fake grades, fake documents saying that her daughter was like an athlete, that she was like an A+ student. And basically with all these like fake documents, her daughter Olivia Jade was able to get into USC, which is also the school that Kennedy goes to, weirdly enough. But yeah, so around like a few years ago, people found out that these rich white parents were doing this, like basically paying their kids' way into school, and they were sentenced. I think Lori Loughlin went to jail for like at least a couple months, but then you have like Olivia Jade, who like your mother basically went to jail for you, and you're still skipping class, being mediocre, not really like reaping the consequences of what happened. And basically, like when you look at her Instagram, her YouTube channel, she's basically like just traveling around, not attending classes. And it begs the question, like, how did people even believe that she went to this school? Because USC is like a very top tier school in the US. Yeah, and then she was also on Red Table Talk. Jada Pinkett Smith basically invited her on to the show to give her a platform to speak about what happened. I feel like that should not have happened at all, because it basically just came off as white privilege all over. But Kennedy, I feel like, is Olivia Jade.
Yeah. Even like the men that Kennedy chose to have in her life. So Jude, once she went to college, she was with Reese for the rest of the book. That's all we know her to be with. And Kennedy's just been through like a whole bunch of different men who are just offer no real substance to her life, except for the one, I think he was Haitian, France. But like, even things didn't work out with him because she didn't want to. This was around the time when she found out that like her mother was black, and she didn't want to accept that. And then like I think she had jokingly told him, and he just like laughed it off and didn't want to accept it either. So I don't know. That could.
Oh, I remember the exact quote. So the thing is with France, like he had been with 4 white women. I think all his relationships were with white women. And the exact quote that I remember is Kennedy was asking him, "Would you be with me if I wasn't white?" And France said, "No, I wouldn't, because you wouldn't be you." And I'm like, okay. And that was the end of the relationship.
Yeah. He was the better one of all of her relationships, but I didn't like him.
I didn't like him either because I don't know, it kind of came off as he was dating her for like a status symbol in a way.
Except he gave her more status than the other way around. He's an educated man. My thing is, you're an educated man. Why do you want this ditzy girl?
Well, it's the fact that there's like, it's like a whole thing where once men reach a certain status level, they kind of go for lighter, whiter,
palm-colored people.
Palm-colored people as like, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I do. I get you.
Yeah. But yeah, I really did not like. I just really did not like Kennedy. It's just like it just makes me think of like
her a better name either.
Yeah, because every time I read that, I'm like, oh, like her name, like John F. Kennedy, like that's what it made me think of. But what the thing is with her character, it just made me think of like wasted potential. The fact that you have access to all these like tutors, private schools, like things that can help you excel academically and in life, and you're still not meeting the bare minimum. Even so, the whole thing with her is the fact that she leaves school in order to become an actress. She basically like flunked out of school and decided she wanted to be like a Broadway actor, which is like fine. And even then, like she was still kind of like half-assing it in a way. And then you also have like her parents who are still supporting her, because I think in one chapter they mentioned that they paid rent for her for a full year so she could go on auditions. And I'm like, whose parents does this?
White people, white affluent people.
Rent for a full year in New York City?
Well, it's not rent now. It's rent back then.
Then, I guess, but damn. it's just like, it just shows a whole another level of privilege, because then you have like Jude, who's like working 2 jobs, doing school on top of that. And I think she went to UCLA, which is another like good school that like, it's not like a joke school where you can just not do the work and pass still. Like, you have to work hard. She was doing 2 jobs, paying rent, and she also got a scholarship too. Like, she went on a track scholarship, right, Anika? I think that's what it was.
Yeah, I think so.
So,
And then, but then didn't she like hurt herself or something?
I think she did get injured, but she didn't drop out of school. She still graduated, and she eventually went on to like med school too. And then you just juxtapose that with Kennedy's characters, and she's sort of just like floating through life. And it just made me think, like, wasted potential.
And then like it goes back to the whole thing that I said about like thinking it. I feel like they were drawn to each other because Jude had some kind of like fixation, or like she was drawn towards Kennedy when she worked at the place where Kennedy was acting at. And then only after that, like through talking to Kennedy, then she saw Stella come in. And then she's like, that's my mother. But that's not my mother. So then she put 2 and 2 together, figured it out. So it's like, yeah, there's definitely, it was destiny for them to have that whole thing happen.
What did you think about the scene where Stella finally meets Jude outside of the Stardust Theater while Kennedy is performing? How did you think about how Stella reacted to the scene?
I think that would have been such an awkward moment to see happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was trying to shut it down, but she couldn't shut it down because Jude was saying too many facts that a random person wouldn't know. And then also Stella's like, this can't be Desiree's child. She's too dark.
Which is also something Jude has dealt with her whole life. It almost seemed like Jude was something out of like Stella's worst nightmare. The fact that like there's this whole other aspect of Stella that like no one knows, and it just personified itself in this dark-skinned woman.
Exactly. And they would never have that bond or like even relationship. Like, she's just Stella. That's not her Aunt Stella. Same with like their Kennedy and Jude's grandmother. Like, that's Jude's grandmother, not Stella's. Stella's grandmother died when she was young. That's her father's mother.
Yeah.
Because her whole life, Stella told her that her family's gone. Her father, her mother, her sister were gone, as in assumed to be dead.
Mm-hmm. But I am glad that Stella and Jude still have this relationship at the end of the book, where even though they're not setting up dates to go and have coffee together, they're still calling each other here and there just to keep in contact with each other.
You mean Jude and Kennedy?
Jude and Kennedy, yes.
Yeah, that was actually a good moment. Like when Kennedy found some sense, and then she went looking for Jude at the hospital, and then she helped Jude with Reese.
Mm-hmm.
I was concerned. I'm like, is Kennedy not going to be? She just going to like let this relationship be ruined?
I mean, it is a shock finding out that your mother had lied to you her whole life, and at the end of the day, you don't know anything about her.
Yeah, but I feel like that's the same. Like, if you find out, that's kind of like to say, like, you find out that who is your father is not your father. Like, but you would still want to find siblings and have a relationship, but maybe not necessarily have a relationship with your father. I think that's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
what did you think about
a relationship with your cousin, but not with your aunt?
Mm. I don't know if this family could ever, because Stella's still lying to her husband at the end of the day. she still hasn't come out with the truth to him. So I don't know if those two.
If she does, who knows what the consequences are? She might end up dead.
Yeah, you never know. It's just like it's a lot of work to keep up that false identity for the rest of your life.
They ran those black people out of the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that kind of introduced me to how Stella was going to be towards other colored people in the latter half of the book is when they were talking about how the colored people, this colored family is going to be moving into their neighborhood in Beverly Hills, and they had like a whole homeowners meeting about it, and basically Stella was the loudest one who basically said, we can't have them come here. If they come here, like, God knows what's going to happen. She was the loudest voice, and I feel like it was just to get people
it was to throw people off of her scent.
Yeah, it was to throw people off her scent. But then, weirdly enough, she was the one who had like a relationship with that family. Once her husband was out the door, she would go out to her neighbor's house. I think her name Lawton. I can't remember
That's
the name.
Last name.
Yeah. She would go over to their colored neighbor's house, and she would spend the day there because it was finally someone that like that could relate to her, even though she still didn't tell this other person that she was colored herself.
And she would do it under the disguise of like their daughters playing together. But she specifically told Kennedy, don't tell your father that I bring you over there.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why she also went over there is because that other neighbor reminded her of Desiree. There were certain things about her personality that just reminded her of Desiree. So being near her felt like she was being close to Desiree again. Yeah. But then all of that ended when Kennedy and their daughter Cindy got into a fight over a game, and then Kennedy just out and said the N-word to that little girl, and basically there was no hangouts after that.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. Oh, we didn't talk about this. So Desiree and Stella's father is murdered by a white man in a horrific crime that sees no justice. This tragedy impacted the sisters in different ways. Desiree seems to bury it, but Stella is very traumatized. Why do you think Stella made such a significant decision to leave behind everything and deny a huge part of who she is? So we know that Stella, out of the two of them, Stella has like the nightmares, just reimagining her father being taken by the ankles by these white men. And like, why do you think that even despite these bad dreams involving white men and white people, that she would want to become one of them?
Well, like I said, I think she's an opportunist. I think she saw a way for her to be free and safe, and the only way that she could be free and safe was if she became part of the group that killed her father. So she saw an opportunity, she took it, and she didn't look back.
Okay, so how do you think Desiree handled her father's death, like throughout life?
I mean,
I think that when they were kids, she was trying to be the strong one for her sister because she knew that Stella was always the weak one.
So during the scene where they're describing what's happening to the father, how the men come in and beat him to death, there's a description of the two girls hiding in the closet, and Desiree is seen almost putting a hand over her sister's mouth like this, trying to calm her down and also help make her be quiet. So like, I think that like just her whole life, Desiree didn't feel like she had the choice but to be strong for her sister. Even there's like several mentions throughout the book where she talks about how she's like 70 minutes older than Stella, right? Which means she has to be like the older sister. She's always has to be like the the sister that like Stella leans on.
Yeah. And I feel like that has followed her throughout her life, like that personality trait, where she then had to be the strong one for Jude, and like, okay, we're going to leave. She just the same way that Stella up and left her, she up and left her husband at the drop of a hat.
Well, she had no choice. Her husband was beating her, so I thought that was a brave thing that she did.
Yeah, like she had to be strong for her and her child.
I thought that was
and then I like how she got into a relationship with the guy who was supposed to track her down.
And I like that they didn't have like a typical relationship in the fact that they felt like they needed to get married right away. Even by the end of the book, they never got married, right? But they're still together. They're still living together. There was an issue with their relationship at first because they had known each other from when they were younger, but her mother wouldn't allow him to date her because he was darker skinned. So she basically said, don't come back here. And he left town after that. And then it's so weird, but like,
it's ironic how he ended up like taking care of her mother in her dying days.
Yeah.
She had Alzheimer's.
She had Alzheimer's. And I think there was a line in the book where they actually mentioned like he actually had grown to love her mother.
He viewed her as his own mother because he didn't have one. And she asked if he was her son.
And it was just interesting the fact that like this boy that you basically shooed away from your daughter years ago is now taking more care of you than one of the daughters that you gave birth to.
Yeah. I find it funny how Desiree was telling Jude like, oh, that you and Reese aren't married, so you can't be sleeping in the same room in my house. But yet her and Early are doing the same thing.
Yeah. I'm like, it sounds hypocritical.
and the thing is with Jude, it's not that they didn't want to get married, it's that they looked into it and they couldn't, but because Reese was born female and the birth certificate says female, and at that time like a gay relationship couldn't happen.
Yeah, they would have had to like create a whole new birth certificate for them, and I don't even know if that was possible back then.
I don't think back then you could. You can't change birth certificate. Because it would be a name change and it would be a sex change.
So for me, I was reading their relationship with the viewpoint of someone who's living in 2020 or 2021, and at the back of my head I'm like, no, because their relationship is happening in like the early 90s, late 80s, so this is groundbreaking, even like groundbreaking for that time period. The fact that like they were together and it was like no issues, like they didn't have any discussion about like pronouns or just like so if I'm with you, am I gay or am I straight? Like nothing. They were just together, like in their love.
Yeah. But like at the same time, it was still like hidden. Because obviously, like, what was the character's name? Was it not Benny? The one who was like a drag queen.
I think it
who
was
helped
Benny.
them out.
It was
so like obviously he knew the situation with Reese and like helped out, and then like I guess Jude kind of caught on after she realized like Reese was always trying to like hide his chest and stuff, and then she caught him one time and he got really mad. She just wanted to help, but like it was still very hush hush, because remember when the surgery is going to happen, she told Kennedy like, oh yeah, he just had a surgery, and Kennedy thought that it was like a lung issue, like that. She thought it was an actual like mechanics issue as opposed to like a more, I don't want to say cosmetic, but like a cosmetic issue.
Like a reassignment surgery, like top surgery, just say that.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to just like how private things like that can be, right? Because even with Reese and Jude, he didn't come out and say it right away, right? It was something, it was information that he gave to her over time once he felt comfortable with it, right? We have to remember, like, people are not going to start off their introductions with, "Hi, my name is da, da, da. I used to be a woman, now I'm a man." Like, no one's going to start off like that. It's an intensely private thing that people go through, that like they won't let everyone in on what their experience has been.
But I feel like nowadays people are more transparent.
People
Or
are
nowadays people
transparent,
should
but
be more transparent.
I don't think everyone has the right to know that information.
No, but the person that you're pursuing a relationship should definitely know.
Oh yeah, the person that you're pursuing
before you get too deep.
Yeah, before you get too deep. But I think she had found out prior to them being in a relationship, though. I think they were still friends before. Like they were living together.
She was living together, yeah.
They were living together, but they hadn't crossed the borderline into a relationship yet. Anika, I think we had this conversation before, because I was asking you, out of my own genuine curiosity, like, at what point do you tell someone that you've been with the same gender or another gender in your relationship? Or is that information you don't even need to like say at all?
What's the question?
So if I have been like bisexual and I've been like been with women in the past, and now I'm with a man, should I tell him that I have been with women in the past, or is it just, you don't need to say anything?
Yeah, I think you should. I think that regardless, male or female, you should be transparent with that, because however you identify is going to affect how the other person identifies. So say you are bisexual or whatever, and like you're in a relationship with a heterosexual person now. Even though they're heterosexual, they would be considered queer, I think. They would be considered a queer person because like they're with a person on the rainbow, as well as if I'm heterosexual but I'm with you and you're transgendered, that by result makes me queer. Like how you identify and how you whatever, if I'm in a relationship with you, that affects me too. Like that affects my identity. So I think you should be transparent with somebody, as well as you should have somebody, like your partner should have the option and the choice to decide like if they want to pursue that based on you being with other people like that. Because the same way like a person, if you are heterosexual and another person's heterosexual and you've had like a lot of sexual experience with somebody, you should let that person know, because they should be able to say, okay, I want to continue this or not, because every single person that you've been with affects them. Same with male or female. Like, you know what they teach us in sex ed in school? It's like if you've been with 3 people, every person that person has been with also affects you. It's like the 7 degrees of separation.
It's an interesting perspective.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
Because then you might be transgendered, or you might be with somebody who's transgendered and like they started their journey early. So like they did the hormones early, they got their surgery, no scars or little to no scars, and then they don't say anything, and then you find out too late that they're transgendered, and you might be looking to be having a child, and they're like lying to you because you're like trying to have a child when nothing's happening.
Yeah, honesty is the best policy. But in the case
but that being said, you're not going to just tell every Tom, Dick, and Harry that. Like that's
No,
like
that's private
reserved
information.
That's
Also,
reserved for the person you're with.
Yeah, and also we're still living in a world where people could lose their lives over their identity, right? Well, yeah, I guess that applies to Stella too in this case, and the fact that she's been passing for so long and lying to so many people that God knows what could happen to her if people found out the truth.
Exactly.
Mm.
Look at what happened with Rachel Dolezal. It'd be worse.
That's just a whole different. By the way, there's a documentary on Rachel Dolezal on Netflix that I kind of watched, but
I
it's
feel
very
like I might have seen it. Like they interview her and her kid or something. Is that the one? Yeah.
She has 3 kids that they're all in the documentary. It's basically like her life at home and what it's been like. She does braids now. Her full-time job is like braiding. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess. I don't know how I feel about this situation.
And then I swear she got like another name, like an African name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she changed her name too. I did not care to find out what it was, but that's the person someone trying to transcend their race. Anika,
Huh?
oh, I had a question. So I feel like all minorities, in some degree. Yes, Shalina,
Yeah.
that was the woman who
That's
pretended to be
the white lady who pretended to be black. And she was in the NAACP and everything. She was like, she had positions.
And she went to Howard University too, misleading them into thinking that she was a black woman.
I mean, you can go to HBCU and not be black, but yeah.
She checked black on the forms that she filled out. So that was a spot that she took that could have been given to someone else that rightfully deserved it. But I was gonna ask. So I feel like a lot of like people of color, especially within Canada, we all have to perform whiteness, if that makes sense. We all have to perform whiteness when we leave our house and go to school, go to jobs, if we want to sadly get ahead in society. So I feel like some people, at home they have accents. Once they leave the house, their accent is gone. A lot of people I know also have like ethnic Sri Lankan Tamil names, but once they get their resume and they put their name down on the resume, they change it to something more English sounding. Like example, when my brother Dinesh was applying for jobs, he changed his name on his resume to Davis, just because he thought that it would give him more callbacks, which he was right.
Did it work?
More callbacks. So I feel like in some ways we all, in one way or another, perform whiteness in order to get ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even in situations as simple as going to Starbucks, gotta give a different name, or like.
I do that.
I know. I was referring to you, Sarah. No, but because like it gets annoying where if somebody asks your name and you have to say it 5 times and then they still not get it right.
I have a story. Well, I'm going to change the names up in this case, but you're going to get the heart of the story. So I have a colleague who she's Sri Lankan like me, but she has an English sounding name. So her name is Rebecca Curtis, not her actual name, made up name, but it's something like that. She's Catholic, so they have like more English sounding names. So Rebecca applied for a job at another company and she got an interview. And once she got into the interview, the recruiter, after the interview was done, the recruiter asked her, "So how come your name is Rebecca Curtis? I was imagining like a white girl." And she took that comment straight to HR and made a complaint saying that this person made this comment, and she got a job with the company right away because they didn't want a lawsuit.
But did she accept the job?
She accepted it.
I wouldn't have, personally, because I don't want to work for a company that's like that.
Well, that was the recruiter, so she wouldn't have been working with the recruiter regardless. But it's the stuff that you have to do when you want to, make money.
I mean, I feel like a lot of parents do that. Like a lot of parents intentionally give their children names like that to try and get them ahead. Like my beloved Gregory in the chat here. If you were to just on paper see Gregory Kelly, what would you think? You wouldn't think that you're getting a black guy.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, so this is another example of like, I guess it's more an example of like code switching, but I have a coworker who she changes her hair every week. I don't think I've ever seen her come into the office with like her natural curly hair. Every week, every Monday, you can expect to see her with like a new weave or a new wig. And basically, we had a discussion about like how we have to present ourselves in the corporate world in order for people to pay us respect. And she mentioned feeling not a lot of confidence about wearing her curly hair because there is a sort of stigma when it comes to people of color wearing like their natural curls, and it's oftentimes viewed as being not like work appropriate, which doesn't make sense. Also, things like dreads are also not considered work appropriate in the corporate world. But when we also think about the corporate world, who is oftentimes setting out the guidelines for how people should look? It's often older white men who are at the top of the pyramid who are dictating these rules, right?
And not only that, I feel like, in regards to the dreadlocks, it also, people look at certain dreads on a tier too. So it's like how you started your dreads, or how neat they look would give you a different kind of reaction. So like somebody who may have done freeform dreads and who like they don't like do any retwists or anything, like they might be looked down upon, as opposed to somebody who has like skinnier, more like properly partitioned braids, because like it's all about like what is considered to be neat and tidy. Like Shalina here has dread, so tell us, Shalina, if you give us any like words of wisdom that you might have in regards to the dread narrative. Yeah, like The Weeknd. His dreads, how it was before, like that was, people would look down upon that because they're like, what's that? Even though I'm not gonna lie, I look at those Florida men's dreads. I forget what they're actually called, but you know the ones that like be sticking out like that, and I'm like, what is going on there? But like, to each their own. If that's what you like, rock it. Let me find a picture of the ones I'm talking about to show you guys.
Oh, 1 second, because someone's knocking on my door.
Okay. Oh, there goes my book. Shalina says it's true. So basically, your dreads were starting to bud. Share screen. Show. These are what I was talking about. The Florida dreads. As I said, to each their own. That ain't for me.
I mean, it's kind of cool. Gives you room to do different hairstyles.
Not really. What different hairstyles are you doing with that? That is the hairstyle.
I like it.
Like the only
It
thing
demands to be looked at.
the only thing that you can do with that is try and put it like all up in one, because they're legit sticking out all over.
Mm. Anika, since we're talking about dreads right now, I don't remember if you remember.
Shalina, does no one else in your family have dreads? Yeah, continue what you're saying until she responds.
Do you remember that pop culture moment a few years ago where Zendaya showed up to the Oscars wearing like
Full
a beautiful
locks?
beautiful full locks, like very, very gorgeous. And then there was a E News commentator who basically said, like, how can she come to this wearing dreads? Like, it's so inappropriate. Like, when I look at that, I see like I smell patchouli oil, which I had to look up what patchouli oil was after that. But basically, she was saying that it was ugly, basically. But whose standards are we following?
Europe.
European standards, because when I saw that, I thought it was super gorgeous.
Is my computer lagging? Oh.
Shalina, your dreads are beautiful. Yeah. From Fashion News. Juliana Rancic. Yes, I remember it now. I remember her name.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Air her out. Say her name.
Well, she lost her job because of that, because it became like a whole racial thing. Like, how can you associate someone's hair with patchouli oil? Like, she was basically saying like weed. She said weed and patchouli oil. That's the thing. That's what she said.
I mean, that whole stereotype just feeds into the whole like Jamaica dreadlock Rasta man stereotype.
And that was the stereotype that she was drawing on, basically.
Shame.
Yeah, shame. But then we also police ourselves in the same way too, don't we? The fact that people don't feel comfortable wearing their natural hair color, the fact that their natural hairstyle, or people like buying bleaching cream, or like, I think there was going back to the book, there's actually a chapter there where Jude talks about wanting to buy bleaching creams in order to lighten her skin to look more like her classmates. And I think her grandma actually tried to like help her out with like more natural ointments and stuff, but obviously like it still didn't work. There's no way you can lighten your skin naturally. You'd have to use like chemicals. But it's just like, it's really sad.
Why did Stella finally decide to go home? What did you think about the reunion of Desiree and Stella, and why didn't Stella stay longer?
My honest to God opinion of Stella is the fact that she's super selfish. And I think that she didn't go home to reunite with Desiree or her mother. She went home because she thought in a weird way that it would somehow bring her daughter back to her. I think she wanted to go home at first because it was basically to go back and tell Desiree to tell Jude to stop harassing them, right? And then the visit just turned into a whole nother thing once Stella found out that her mother had Alzheimer's.
Like, I feel like the most selfless thing that Stella did in that period of time was get rid of her ring, like give her ring to Desiree so that she could get money for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the only, like, since the moment she left her sister, that's the only thing that she'd ever done for her sister.
For their family.
Yeah. Like, you're this white woman and you're saying that you couldn't send some money back to your mother anonymously, or like with a little note just saying like, hey, I'm okay, here's some money, I hope you're doing well?
Well, it goes back to what we were saying in the fact that she created this false identity for herself, but then she also after a while just believed the identity. She believed the lies that she created.
Yeah, she could still do that and still send money. You know, you know how much white people send charity stuff? Your own family could be charity.
I just think that she was so into this whole new life that she created herself that even the thought of acknowledging what was once before scared her to death. Even later on in the story, once Kennedy found out about her mom's real family and the fact that Kennedy had this photo of Stella and Desiree as children with their mother, and she brought this photo to Stella and said, like, this is you, this is your family, how come you never told me? And then Stella said something like, that's not me, that's someone else, that's not me, that's dark, that's a colored girl, do I look colored? Like, knowing full well that was her in the photo.
And,
I mean, it
and
goes to show that once people have like a taste of so-called freedom, how far they would go to keep that freedom. I wanted to say, so there are parts in the book where Jude is constantly referred to as not looking anything like her mother, that she takes after her father. And that kind of made me think about like my own childhood, in the fact that I'm a lot darker than my mom. So there were occasions where I would be out with my mom and people would just come up and be like, is that your daughter? That can't be your daughter. Like Tamil people coming up to us and be like, how is that girl your daughter? She's so dark. And then my mom would just be like, she takes after her father. But then like it kind of like warped, it kind of like hit me in my head, like it hit my mental, my emotional being in a way, because I thought people were equating me to like being masculine, in the fact that like they were saying like I look like my dad, when in actuality I look like more like my mom's side. Like Anika, I've shown you pictures of like my grandma, like I look exactly like her. Mm-hmm. But it's because the fact they see this skin tone, and then all of a sudden it's just like, no, you can't be like us. You can't be like her.
And I think that's the thing. Like people are dumb in that they just look at the surface of color to say like, oh, you look like X, Y, and Z. When it's like, you should be looking at a person's like facial features, their structure, the way that they walk, the way that they stand, like the way that their hands and feet are shaped. Like when I was a kid, people used to say that I looked like my dad, and obviously I'm darker than my dad.
Mm-hmm. You look like your mom.
Now I look like her. And I was telling her this the other day, and she's like, I don't see it. I'm like, listen, sometimes I'll look at a picture, or like I'll look at myself in the mirror and like I see you. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I don't see it. Mm-hmm. Like, well, if other people see it and I see it, it's there.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out something that Shalina just wrote. So she just said, why do people need to make such comments? I feel that too. Like, I don't understand why you need to go up to someone and say this to them while the kid is standing right there, or just say nothing at all.
Or is that an actual question? Because that is the Caribbean way. Like Caribbean people don't ask questions. They speak it. They'll talk about you. They'll talk about you to your face, but not talking to you. They'll talk about you with you standing right there. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're not too nice about it either. That's like, in the book, you had mentioned how she got teased for being, how Jude had been teased for being a tar baby. But like, when I was a little kid, and I'd like go on vacation, my family would say that about me, but I never looked at it, and I still don't look at it as an insult. I liked it. I'm like, oh, I'm getting darker.
I mean, I have mixed feelings about stuff like that because some of the most hurtful things people have ever said to me have always been like skin color, insult. Like, if I've had so many people call me names, but before they call me that name, they always have to put black, blank, black word, things like that.
So it's
And
basically like a word association. It's like a psychology thing where if 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 you're always pairing a negative outcome with a certain thing, it's going to be negative. Same with like with Pavlov, the dogs have been paired with like the ringing of the bell to the food. So just hearing the bell makes them like their mouth water. It's the same way. So like you hear certain phrases or certain words or certain situations, and it kind of activates you.
Yeah, 100%. It's just like, and once you start associating things to certain words, it kind of makes you want to take a step back and make you want to do everything in your power so people will never want to associate you with that thing ever again.
This is kind of unrelated, but it kind of goes with the way that it kind of goes with words and how we keep hearing words and we associate it with a certain things. So I'm sure you've heard the phrase blood is thicker than water, right? And the way that it is used is to say that family comes above all, like basically like your blood is top tier, right? That's like what people use it for. But it's actually, that's not what it means. That phrase is taken from the phrase, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which actually means the total opposite of what people are trying to say. It literally means that the people that you choose to be your family, or the people that you choose to be your friends, are more important, or like you have a better bond with than family. Because if you choose somebody, you're not going to disrespect them or you're going to hold them accountable, but family will just walk all over you and say that like we're family, like I can do this. So it's like blood is not thicker than water. Your bond with your fellow man is thicker than your family.
It's interesting.
My mom likes to use blood is thicker than water all the time. So next time she uses it, I'm going to put it on her. I'm going to give her a little lesson. And like when you think about it in the context of like family, it's true. Because if you're saying the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, the person that you're choosing, so say you choose to get married or you choose to whatever, you're choosing that person. So that becomes your family now, and that is like more important than the family that birthed you. Because if you're looking at it in like the biblical sense, it says that a man should cleave from his mother and father and take on a wife, in that like a husband and wife have to value themselves more than their children, more than they value their children. And the same way that when you leave and cleave from your family, your spouse now becomes more important to you than your parents. So it goes back to that same thing where the blood of your covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Yeah, I'm out here dropping facts, man. I read.
And you're teaching us when you read.
Yeah. So you better feel special because you are the covenant blood bonds that I choose.
And all the listeners in this chat.
Literally, because there's only 3 people.
Yeah.
And you all mean so much to me personally.
Anika, do you have any like wrapping thoughts?
Oh, yes, there's a few questions left. Well,
Okay.
One question. What did you think about the ending? Were you happy to see Desiree finally leave Mallard?
I was happy to see Desiree leave Mallard, but my happiness at the ending of the book had more to do with Jude and where Jude was in her life.
Reese.
Jude and Reese, the fact that Jude and Reese were still in love, still together, the fact that she was completing med school, and there was just this certain level of self-assuredness that she had at the end of the book where it wasn't present in the beginning. And I loved that for her. I wanted that for her so desperately. I could care less about anyone else, but as long as like Jude had that and it was going well for her.
So Jude is your favorite character in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's called The Vanishing Half, and the book is supposed to be about the twins, but I feel like the book was actually Jude's book. Because if you think about it, the book starts with Jude in that she's coming to Mallard, which is the place of her mother, and like she hasn't known Mallard up until this point, so she's introduced as this Black girl coming to this lake, and then the book literally ends with Jude in Mallard floating in the water.
And in a weird way, Anika, I feel like Jude represented different things to different characters in the book. The fact that like there were some people in the beginning of the book during her child in Mallard where if Jude was in their presence, it was like an insult almost. The fact that they would ask, why is this dark-skinned child in our town, in our midst? Why is she going to our school? Who is she? Yeah. And the fact that they had such a problem with her speaks more to how they felt about themselves, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The fact that they're so negatively reacting to her and the fact that they focus so much on the pure darkness of her skin spoke more about the pure hatred that they felt towards themselves and that particular lineage that they have within themselves. And then what Jude represented to Stella once Stella finally found out that this is Desiree's niece, it was almost like, oh my gosh, my past is coming to get me. Like that's what Desiree represented to her in that moment. And then Kennedy was almost like this. She represents what my life could have been if my mom had been someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Therese, it was almost just like Therese. She was just acceptance. She was love. She was everything that he wanted in a family, in a person, in a friend, in a lover.
Because when he left to become a man, like his parents basically disowned him.
And then Desiree, she represented, she was the reason why Desiree left her abusive marriage. She was her way out. She was the reason why she stayed in Mallard for a long time. I don't know.
I think she stayed in Mallard because of her mother too.
Mm-hmm. But it was interesting to see how this one person, because of her skin tone and who she was on the outside, how that influenced her relationship with the people around her.
Yeah. Jude is the MVP of this book.
Jude is MVP.
In fact, I feel like for all of our books, we should probably be like, so who's your favorite character in the book?
Oh, Anika, I back to Jude. There was that ending paragraph where like she's back in town and she just finished attending the funeral of her grandmother, and her and Reese are running out towards the river, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Did you pick up on that sentence where it said like people in town couldn't believe that this dark child was like a doctor, that Desiree's child had done that? And I'm like, yeah, she did do that, and she's gonna do more than that.
Yeah. How could that dark girl have done all those things Desiree said? Like, not Desiree didn't say that. How could that dark girl have done all those things Desiree said?
Mm-hmm.
That's how it's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did do that.
She was in medical school now, they'd heard from her mother. Half the room expected her to walk in wearing a white coat. anyways, people, I guess that is our discussion of this book. Sharenta would rate it 5 out of 5.
5 gold stars. Before we go, I wanted to do one shout out because I said I would. So one of our listeners, Miranda Manawi, is currently helping Toronto vaccinate its people, and she's currently at the Rogers Center. And I just wanted to shout her out and say thank you for all you're doing, for all of what you're doing, and you're amazing, Miranda. Thank you.
Today's the vaccination day, so like at the Scotiabank Theater, they would have the huge thing where everybody from all around the GTA went to get their vaccinations, and I think the GO train was free because of it.
And Miranda's one of the she's one of the workers there who you will meet if you are getting vaccinated today.
That's our first shout out ever.
I thought it was well deserved.
Yeah, we should do this more. We can put it in the banners next time.
Yeah.
So it could like scroll across.
Oh yeah, okay. That's a great idea.
We'll know for next time.
Yeah, I'll know for next time.
Basically, of our 3 viewers out there, if you know anybody who deserves a shout out for whatever reason, book related or like community outreach related, let us know. We don't have much of a platform, but we love to let people them know.
And also, just a very quick shout out to the listeners in our chat who are always here to support us. Shalina, Greg, Sean. You guys are A+. A+.
A+. Yes. So our next get together is on July 11th, I believe. I lost the book in my room. However, I have the digital copy. So that's how I'll probably be reading it until I find the book. But the book is Nubia Real One. It is a graphic novel, and it is about Nubia, aka our wonderful Black Wonder Woman. And it is set where she's kind of like a teenager, and like she's going through trying to navigate the world as a teenager and also having these powers. From the little half a chapter that I've read so far before, it seemed great. Like it deals with like the Black Lives Matters protesting and the movement. So I'm on board. I'm excited. It's going to be a quick read, obviously. So you guys in the chat, you should read it so that you can discuss with us. It's July 11th. So until then, we will catch you guys on the flip side. We hope that you read a book or two. It doesn't have to be a novel. It could be a magazine, a comic book, or whatever, but just stay with the literature. Ignite your mind. Anyways, we'll catch you guys. See you guys in 2 weeks.
Bye, guys.